Loch Kelly is a meditation teacher and psychotherapist. Additionally, he collaborates with neuroscientists at Yale, UPenn, and NYU to study how awareness training can enhance compassion and well-being. Loch has a new book out called Shift into Freedom, The Science and Practice of Open-Hearted Awareness. Thanks for being here, Loch.
Thanks, Kathy. Great to be here with you.
I know you've been meditating for a long time.
Yes.
How long have you been meditating?
Well, I guess it depends
years.
on how I define meditating.
It also depends upon, you know, like if you want to hide your age or something.
Right.
Like I've been 5 years, maybe.
I mean, if I look back now and I define meditating as positive shift of consciousness into this more optimal sense of well-being and, you know, functioning from a kind of flow state, I think I probably was meditating for me when I started playing sports. So I think that's how I discovered it first. I'd get into what's called the zone or into a flow state. And I remember I played ice hockey goalie and I think I chose to do it because I would end up feeling like this way of becoming a cat. And in fact, one of the things that relates to one of my practices is I heard this sportscaster talking about a quarterback on a football team, and he said, well, he's got eyes in the back of his head. And so I started saying, well, how does he have eyes in the back of his head? Let me see if I can do that. And I literally started opening my awareness up, and then when I was playing ice hockey goalie, I'd start by opening my awareness into this panoramic awareness, and then I would watch somebody would shoot the puck, and there'd be all these legs, and my hand would go out, and the puck would be there, and I'd be like, that was cool. I kind of knew it was going there, but I didn't know it consciously.
Yeah.
And so I would get in this zone. And so for me, meditation is intentionally shifting of your everyday consciousness into a more optimal mode of both rest, but also aliveness. So, and into an actual more intelligent type of knowing, but the intelligent kind of knowing is more non-conceptual than conceptual, and so it's what's often called wisdom, but it's literally a felt sense of wisdom is not just being a wise guy or knowing trivial pursuits, answers, or something.
Facts or
Facts or information. Yeah. It's actually knowing from being. It's actually being in this flow where you feel whatever you've put in is available.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And if we think about people who we think are wise, right? Yeah. Wise people, we don't think they're people who can tell you what year someone was born or the year that something happened or that's details or, you know, whatever. We think of somebody who, has that kind of, open kind of spacious kind of knowledge kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of embodied in loving. That's the other thing. There's some kind of compassionate dimension, and that's why I call my book The Science and Practice of Open-Hearted Awareness. Mm-hmm. And so the first, in terms of why I got into this and how I kind of continued to play with this is that then the next significant thing in my life was when I was in college and I had 3 major losses, 3 deaths in a very short period of time. My father developed brain cancer and had like a brain tumor the size of a lemon in one of the lobes of his brain, his left lobe, he was an engineer, so it was in his kind of rational mind. And he went through surgery and he became like a little kid and he'd bring workbooks to me. And he was like more loving with my girlfriend when she came to the door. And then he had a relapse and kind of from the cancer passed away. And then within 3 months, my best friend from college died in a car accident. And then my grandmother, who had been living with us for 6 years, died. And so it was like within this time. And I just felt, like my peers hadn't had this experience of all this loss. And even the counselors at school were kind of doing this Freudian thing with me where I go in and they just like listen and take notes. And I'd be like, I don't think that's not helping so much. Mm-hmm. So I was coming out of the library one night and I just felt like the weight of the world. I felt so heavy and depressed and overwhelmed and just not even knowing. And I just remember kind of trudging up the hill and saying to myself, or having this voice kind of say, I don't know if you can take this any longer. I don't know if I can take this any longer. And then I kind of looked up at the sky, and all of a sudden it felt like I took a breath and something lifted, like something lifted, and I felt like this expansive sense of openness, and I just kept looking, and my awareness kind of opened to the sky, and I felt like whoosh, this sense of burden and this more connection with a bigger sense of, you know, I don't know what I would call it then. I was just like relief. But then I started both crying and laughing at the same time. But I felt like something had shifted, something had lifted, something had dropped, something had opened, and I accessed this dimension that stayed with me then, you know, as the foreground for a week or so, and then it kind of went into the background, and I started kind of more normal grieving, but with this sense of spaciousness, support, openness. And so that, you know, being in the middle of college, I said, well, I think this might be what I'm interested in. Like, whatever that was, let me find out what that was and whether I can do it intentionally. Yeah. Now that it's kind of more in the background, how do I get it back, or how do I live from there? Is that possible? What is? And then I started reading psychology, philosophy, studying meditation, went to a Zen retreat, did TM, different types of meditation, always looking not to join a club or one particular tradition, but really like, what can you teach me about this? How do we do this? What are you doing? What's your purpose? So just very curious, and with kind of a modern or contemporary scientific, like what's true, what's real, but also, you know, really interested in consciousness and living from kind of openness and love.
And so you practice these different TM and Zen, and did you stick with them, or did that change? Or
I kind of changed. I would go from one to the other. I do both and kind of compare, and I, you know, but always stayed in that field of psychology, spirituality. I ended up going and teaching high school for a year, and then went to graduate school in psychology and spirituality at Union Theological Seminary. And then the first year I thought I might leave, but then a Jesuit priest who had done his PhD in Buddhism came and said, "Do you want to come study with me?" And so I went to Sri Lanka on a fellowship, and then went up to the hill country there and studied Theravada Buddhism, Vipassana, or insight meditation for 6 months, doing long retreats, and then went from Sri Lanka up through India and met some other people, met the Dalai Lama, and then went over to study with a Tibetan Dzogchen Mahamudra teacher.
wow.
And he was the one who showed me very quickly a couple of these little pointers, so that I felt like when he gave me these pointers and these glimpse practices, that I shifted into a place that I had discovered at the end of a 7-day or 21-day retreat. But I went right in. I said, oh, that's possible. I kind of knew that was possible. Let me continue to, you know, explore this. And that kind of led me to writing this book and to checking things out with teachers, and then getting involved with neuroscientists, and then academic psychology, and then coming back to New York and actually being involved with doing outpatient mental health work with psychiatric population in Brooklyn, and then working with families of 9/11 tragedy, and working with these kind of principles of meditation and psychotherapy.
So it sounds like your background was kind of a mishmash of like different, mostly Buddhist practices, right?
Yeah, mostly Buddhist, some Hindu, Advaita Vedanta, this kind of non-dual practice from Hinduism. Certainly I studied, you know, Christianity and Judaism in my theological training. So I studied with a good friend of mine is Father Thomas Keating, who's started centering prayer and the Christian tradition, and then scientific methods too. So I was always after the same thing, but I was willing to go and look. And I always felt that, I was really in the human lineage rather than, and that all the lineages started from common, shamanism and, around the world, which is the same, and then developed cultural and religious traditions and then branched off, so that I always felt like I was following the genuine principles, but they all go off into more contemporary expressions. And so I always checked with lineages, but also checked with contemporary science, and then checked with what really works.
And so you were able to sort of see this common thread between all
Yes.
these different traditions, even though the traditions may be different, but there's like a commonality in the way things
That's
sort
right.
of evolve
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I want to talk a little bit about your book, because
Sure.
then I think it'll take us back to
Okay.
your origins. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about this book and the CD series.
Yeah, so the book is it starts by talking a little about my own experience, and then it goes through a way of supporting the practices that are in the CD or the audio, which are series of short glimpse practices, short pointers. You could call them inquiries, maybe as much as you call them meditations, which means that the training is in leading you to literally learn how to shift your own consciousness through learning to use awareness as the dial or the tuner, and shift out of kind of a contracted center point of view of a little sense that there's a little me inside my head looking at my eyes, and opening to a more supportive, spacious, and embodied, open-hearted dimension from which you can live in a very much of a flow state. So the book takes you through a little bit about what are these new dimensions of consciousness, and then supports it with neuroscience, with traditional comparative practices from different lineages, and then looks at some studies that are being done now, and talks about, then most of it is how to do it. So how do you shift? Where do you shift into? When you shift out of contraction, is it enough? It's not enough just to let go of what's in the way and trust you'll get into what's more positive, but this is a way to directly shift out of a contracted small sense of self and then into a more wise, loving, spacious awareness, and then that awareness feels embodied, and then feeling like there's an ability to live from this kind of open-hearted or heart-mind center rather than living from your head, and then kind of starting to rewire your brain and your functional conditioning so that you can live from this new center. So it's like shifting from operating system 1 to operating system 2, which
From
is
from more of a head thing to more of maybe a heart thing or a body thing?
That's right. To more of a, from head to heart, or from small head, small contracted sense of self, ego center, to spacious awareness, then spacious awareness as the ground is embodied and open-hearted. So the kind of way we can drop down and open up, or open up and include, and these kind of 5 dimensions of mind or consciousness are the things that are talked about throughout all these wisdom traditions. And so I just kind of simply go through them and then show how to immediately glimpse these different states and shift through them so that you get a taste for what's already here. Because the premise of the book and this direct path meditation tradition is that the awakeness that you're seeking is already here. So it's not something that's developed like a skill, like, oh, I've got to do 10 years of meditation to develop the ability to meditate.
So it's a glimpse of what is.
A glimpse of what is. That's right. That's a good way of defining it, yeah. So you're glimpsing what is, then you familiarize yourself, then you kind of train to remain, then you lose it, you go back because the other's pattern is stronger, has more inertia, and then you kind of say, no big surprise, just re-recognize, and then you do another small glimpse, return, familiarize, train to remain, and then kind of live from here. And you actually, by doing with your eyes open and in a way that you start to actually live and relate and create from here, you actually rewire your brain to living from an awake consciousness rather than a tradition where you go off on long retreats and get very calm, and then 2 days after you're back in the operating system one, and you say, boy, do I need a retreat. And so this way you're integrating it, and so you're able to do kind of this advanced practice in the midst of your daily life.
So what's on the CD?
Yeah, so the book is the explanation of how to go through it and what it means as best that you can write it. So this was the dance of my taking years and years to try to put into words what words can't describe. So this silent music, this kind of, but I also felt it's practical, it's palpable. It if we can explain music and if we can explain microchips and math, then I bet you I can do it. I bet you I can. But it is also like explaining how to ride a bicycle, on the other hand.
Or how to make art.
Or how to make art,
You can tell someone how to paint or how to play music, but
That's
you
right.
can't,
Yeah. But in some ways, it's a little more than how to make art. It's almost a little more like how to ride a bicycle, in that I can say, okay, when you start to fall over to the right, lean to the left, But eventually, once I say, okay, here's basically how you do it, then once you get on the bicycle, you'll go like, oh, yeah, I know what, here's what balance is. Oh, I didn't realize I could balance. Oh, and now next time you get on, balancing. Oh, well, that's something I don't think about, but I'm doing it. And so this shift is like, okay, shift into balancing from this open-hearted, balanced mind and heart. And you go like, okay, and now I'm balancing. And you go like, oh, that's not that hard. That's like...
So on the CDs, it's these different individual
That's right.
practices that you call glimpses, right? Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
Glimpse practices, or pointers, or shifts into freedom, or unhooking of awareness from thinking and moving into these other dimensions. And so the audio is just me leading you through this series of practices, which takes you through different doorways for different types of learners, different principles to navigate your own consciousness. And once you learn how to unhook and drop and open and include, you let me kind of guide you through, and then you learn how to do it yourself. And by the end, you're not even saying any words. I sometimes start like, I'll say, okay, here's the advanced version. So you end up shifting into this felt sense of living from this quiet mind, this kind of loving, accepting, bigger dimension which can accept your own emotions. There's more space for your emotions, and less reactivity, and less judgment out, and less projecting thoughts onto others, and less scanning for danger, less projecting into the future, worst case scenarios that you're going to try to prevent yourself. You just drop all that, and you're in the now, and you have this new operating system of awake awareness which knows all of what you would need to know. So you've almost like shifted into being a Tai Chi master. So you're actually safer, and you could respond at any moment, and you could use your hand to pick up a cup, or you could use thought. You could pick up a thought, think about something, and then you can let go of thought and feel like peace of mind is actually your normal condition. And that's what it feels like right now. If I just drop, it's literally like what's called automatic thoughts are going on in the background or like behind the scene, so that, and yet I'm not in like a spaced out state. I'm like right here, but I'm not looking to thought and then having thought look to thought to orient about who I am. What am I doing? What is she saying? What am I going to say next? Like all that is, there's like a pouring back of the conceptual mind into an intelligence that trusts.
And that takes us back to, at the very beginning, you were talking about the flow state and the
Yes,
hockey,
that's right.
you know, and how when you're in that state, that like you're not really thinking, that you're, I don't know, like pure essence or something, right?
Yes,
you
that's
know,
right.
like you're really just there, and everything that happens is coming not from the thought processes.
That's right.
It's not analytical or
Right.
planned or whatever. You're just
Yeah. And so that,
going
you know,
with
that
it.
orientation, you know, I think, therefore I am. So it's almost as if we become the thinker. And, you know, we try to become calm by thinking faster and being smarter and replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And we stay like in this little cloud and try to clean it up. And this is like, no, shift into this higher dimension of wisdom, this lower, this wider, subtler. And then from there, you feel like you have access to any information that's in, you know, in the file. So sometimes I say you shift from head to heart. You learn to live at home in your heart, and you use Wi-Fi to the files.
And I understand that, like, especially like when
Yeah.
you're giving the example of hockey or some
Yes.
something. But I wonder, how does that work? Like if you're writing a book,
Yeah.
writing a book perhaps,
That's
or
how
or I don't know, like something that, you know, we tend to think we
Yeah.
think about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Well, what a flow state is you train, you know, somebody uses the example, if you train 10,000 hours in something, and then it becomes so second nature that you don't have to think about what you're doing. So in this way, we've, you know, learned to walk 10,000 hours, talk 10,000 hours, language 10,000 hours, relate to other people 10,000. And so when we shift into this new dimension of consciousness and this source of mind or this awake mind or this true nature or whatever that word you want to use, that you feel, this open-hearted awareness, is where you're living from, then the other things are natural. You don't think about how to walk every time you walk. So the same thing, you don't second guess yourself when you're talking. You trust that this other wise intelligence is where you're coming from, and then you learn to do it.
So so you think that it's just sort of practice then?
Yes.
And I guess, I mean, the way you would do it, I'm asking, is that you would just sort of put an intention of trying to do that, say when you're trying to write an email, and then just keep trying to bring back that spacious awareness kind of thing.
Well, it's
right?
different. It's different than intention, because intention is still of the small mind. So it's almost like, I'm going to try to be more accepting. Let me try to be more accepting. And this is actually, you instead of trying from your effort, from your ego, from your will, from this doer, you literally shift out into this dimension of consciousness that's already here, that's already accepting. And when you shift into it, you are accepting, because that dimension of consciousness, which is naturally already here, when that's where you are, you're non-resistant, non-judgmental, you're accepting, and yet you have ability to discriminate in the ways you need to.
It's interesting. I'd like to experience that and see.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe you, but I'd like to. I mean, I get the idea, but
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is why I wrote this book, because people don't believe it, because it's not on the map of Western philosophy. It's not on the map of Western psychology. And even in the mindfulness tradition or some of the other meditation traditions, they're so focused on the first initial preliminary practices that in the monastery tradition, they say, oh no, that's where we're going, is what I'm teaching, but you have to do that for 20 years
That's
first. And what I'm saying is,
You can do it in a
I
minute.
can do it in a minute, and the people who write me say that it's true.
Yeah. Yes, and unfortunately we're out of time.
Okay.
So thank you for sitting here with this segment, and I recommend your book highly. I love it.
That's great. Thank you so much.